Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, a European royal who stood out from the crowd.
Beatrix was a very charismatic international figure.
She was very, very popular.
Her 33 years on the Dutch throne weren't without controversy. From public opposition over her choice of husband,
there have been stories that you were a member of Hitler youth groups.
We had become anti-German.
to riots on the day she took the throne.
There was a battle scene in the street.
There were lots of protesters as well as policemen who almost died that day.
And even fatal attacks on her and her family during a royal celebration.
She was in shock. It was like a war zone.
Yet this iconic queen secured huge public confidence.
It's quite possible she saved the monarchy.
After 3 decades, she abdicated as an incredibly popular monarch. What was the key to her success?
She must have huge inner strength.
Huge perfectionist. She's also a very warm, witty person.
Are there lessons for our own royal family?
It's a very different royal model than we have in the UK.
Mr. President, let us set our sights on a just and humane society for all mankind.
And who is the real woman behind the Dutch crown?
She was a boundary breaker.
I don't know how much she has. There's figures going around from 25 billion to 750 million.
She's exceptionally hardworking, exceptionally dutiful.
Friendly, open, hospitable, one of us.
Having abdicated as queen 8 years ago, Beatrix's life today is markedly different. She no longer lives in one of the main royal palaces of Amsterdam or The Hague, but has returned to her smaller residence in the countryside.
Queen Beatrix, who is now Princess Beatrix, lives in the small castle. It's called Drakenstein, with a moat around it and with lawns and a huge fence around it. You can't see it from outside. And there she lives, sort of quietly.
Today, Beatrix is viewed with affection by her public.
I think it would be very hard for her to divorce herself from the Dutch identity and psyche. The Dutch people really look to her as a guiding force, sort of a grandmother of a nation.
But for much of her reign, she was seen as a distant head of state.
Beatrix vond dat er een monarch moest grote afstand hebben tot het volk, omdat dat veel meer respect opleverde. En dat was het voortbestaan van de monarchie. Beatrix was afstandelijk met mensen en hield een natuurlijke afstand.
These are really important, her convictions. She knows she is right. She's not a person all the time, should I do this, should I do that, hesitating all the time. She's pretty straight.
Her rigorous approach to the role made lasting impressions on those who worked closely with her. Sir Colin Budd was British ambassador to the Netherlands from 2001 to 2005.
She's a huge perfectionist. That, as usual with perfectionists, evokes usually 2 reactions. One is huge admiration. People acknowledged and deeply respected her professionalism. From time to time, irritation, because she was a presser. You know, she would press and press and press, and if she didn't get exactly what she wanted, e.g. answers from her prime ministers, she would press again later. And that didn't please all of them all of the time.
Across her 33-year reign, Beatrix's formal public persona softened. Her abdication in 2013 became a moment to celebrate the reign of a much-loved monarch.
This was a positive act. It wasn't a sign of Beatrix being unpopular, neither the monarchy being out of touch, but it was just a sense that the moment was right to pass it on to her son and to the next generation.
Beatrix is not the first Dutch monarch to step down and watch the next generation take the throne. Her mother, Queen Juliana, abdicated in 1980 to make way for Beatrix. As did her grandmother, Queen Wilhelmina, in 1948. Abdication may be a popular tradition in the Netherlands, but to the British it appears unusual.
Is there a lesson here for the British in how to change monarchs?
Yes, they should have done it years ago.
The Dutch have quite a refreshing view of monarchy. They don't see it as just heritage. They don't see it as something for life. It's seen as a career. They want someone who can breathe new life into the country.
Although the British have a different view on the role of the monarch, Beatrix is reported to enjoy a warm relationship with Queen Elizabeth II, who is also a distant cousin.
They have a kind of natural affinity in the way they feel absolutely convinced of the honor of the office that they represent. I think they get on very well.
And after lunch, it was time for the giving of gifts, which meant in Queen Beatrix's case, a new carriage horse for the Queen.
They're said to be close friends and confidants, and that's quite interesting because it's not very many people that understand what it's like to be the queen of a country. They're united by being quite lonely at the top.
Every year, the king or queen gets a nationwide street party in their honour. Each April, King's Day celebrates the birthday of the current monarch, Beatrix's son, King Willem-Alexander. Revellers wear orange, the unofficial Dutch national colour. It's a reference to the name of the royal family's dynasty, the House of Orange-Nassau.
They keep all the Dutch together. Everybody is orange. So we're very happy with our king and his family.
When Beatrix was on the throne, it was known as Queen's Day.
It's a very creative day. We all deck out in orange. We wear silly orange hats. As long as it's orange, you can just do it. So it's a big national party.
The monarchy is a very visible part of Dutch life. But Queen Beatrix brought a unique element to her royal image.
She kind of made a brand of herself. Before YouTube, before social media, before any of this, with her haircut.
For a photographer, Beatrix was really great to take pictures of because from every angle where you stand, a silhouette, from the back or from the front, you could recognize it was Queen Beatrix.
Her hairstyle is a craze that's been followed across the Netherlands, with people even still to this day wanting to copy her hairstyles. She very much embodied the glamour of European royals.
Maybe she could hide in that Beatrix brand a little bit, even when she wasn't as confident as she appeared to be, because it's also a performance that she gave, which she was very, very good at.
In 1985, her iconic image provided inspiration for Andy Warhol, who gave her a pop art makeover in his series, Reigning Queens.
Andy Warhol very deliberately sort of showed her stature, her prestige, but also her wealth and opulence.
The Dutch government took full advantage of that by putting up copies of Andy Warhol in all Dutch embassies across the world.
Beatrix did more than just make a splash in the art world. She made her voice heard on the international political stage.
She was able to advance movement simply just by being there. And I think that was the case with the European Union.
Beatrix was one of the first heads of state to speak to the European Parliament when the EU expanded by 10 members in 2004. And in 1997, she gave a speech in support of furthering European unity before global leaders.
The momentous transformation which took place in Europe 8 years ago has opened the way for a new program of cooperation which now spans the entire breadth of the continent.
In many ways, she became seen as this kind of European stateswoman, very comfortable and regularly in attendance at, whether it be the European Commission or the European Parliament, and was clearly respected.
Although she was expected to be politically neutral as a head of state, Beatrix's outlook was known to be liberal.
She was a boundary breaker. She took perhaps one of the most political roles we've seen a modern European royal take.
Beatrix embodies that national character of tolerance and liberal outlook. She spoke about inclusivity, honoring different perspectives, honoring different ways of life.
Not only was she one of the most political monarchs 20th century Europe had ever seen, but Beatrix was also arguably the richest.
Queen Beatrix was one of the most wealthy monarchs in the world, with more wealth indeed than Queen Elizabeth II. And various investigations looked to her investments, her stock holdings. It was thought that she had significant investments in Shell, the petroleum company.
I don't know how much she has. There's very different figures going around, from 25 billion to 750 million.
In 2021, nearly 48 million euros of public money was budgeted for the Dutch monarchy, making it the most expensive in Europe. The royal family's wealth has long been a controversial topic.
It is a fiercely egalitarian country. So if you're trying to be a successful monarch in a country as egalitarian as that, then you need to, as far as possible, look modest.
Queen Beatrix reigned through 33 dramatic years. From riots on her wedding day to personal tragedies and political turmoil. Yet how did this seemingly distant queen overcome controversy to win the hearts of her nation and then step away from the throne with their overwhelming support? In 1938, with Europe on the brink of war, the Dutch people were distracted from an uncertain future with some brighter news. The birth of a royal baby, Princess Beatrix.
A princess is born. So Dutch subjects learn that Princess Juliana's baby is a daughter.
Beatrix's grandmother, Wilhelmina, was queen, and her mother, Juliana, the heir, making the newborn princess second in line to the throne. At the age of 2, as German forces overran the Netherlands, she was evacuated from the country, along with the rest of the royal family, on a British warship sent by George VI of Britain.
Arriving in Britain are members of the Dutch royal family. Princess Beatrix gazes wide-eyed at the British coast.
After a brief stay in London, the family relocated to Canada.
They lived actually really quite informally. Beatrice went to the local school. She was at one point known as Trix of Orange. And I think they had rather a nice life out there.
As the eldest of 4 girls, the family dynamic instilled a strong sense of responsibility in Beatrix from an early age.
she is a textbook example of, the firstborn who then, when the second comes, kind of goes like, oh, what's happened? I thought I was the center of the universe, and now there's another one getting all the attention. So I better be good, responsible, somebody who's very serious about her task.
In the immediate aftermath of the war, the royal family were greeted as returning saviors of the nation.
This sense of Beatrix, her mother and grandmother, having been there for the nation at a time of adversity, and Beatrix has been popular because of that ever since.
In those formative years, that will have really shaped Beatrix's understanding of what it means to be a monarch. And she's always taken that role very seriously, as uniting her nation, guiding them, leading them through times of crisis.
Beatrix went on to study law and economics, amongst other subjects, at the prestigious University of Leiden.
She was very political. She was involved in student societies there. She's been involved in a number of social justice causes.
Even at this young age, Beatrix's awareness of her role put her at a distance from her peers.
Zij heeft toen ze in haar studententijd heeft ze gezegd aan het eind van haar studie tegen haar medestudenten: vanaf nu ben ik u voor jullie. Het was van haar een hele diepe geloof dat een koningin nou eenmaal op afstand moest blijven van haar volk, om het sprookje van het koningschap te bewaren.
Upon graduating, she became founding president of the European Working Group, an organization for young people who believed a united Europe could make a difference to the world.
I met her in 1962, shortly after a speech she gave to a group of European students in which she fiercely attacked Europe as it was then being developed. My impression was an open, determined, and at the same time humble personality.
In 1962, Beatrix visited villages in Iran as they recovered from a devastating earthquake.
She went to Iran to encourage and to discuss current issues and needs with the volunteers of the European Working Group.
She goes there and you see her quite happy, working on, let's put it simply, on a better world, helping other people. In the beginning, you could see her as really an activist, an idealist. And she has stayed that way.
The young princess would soon meet another who shared her values, German diplomat Klaus von Amsberg. They announced their engagement in the summer of 1965.
I just remember, in a way, the romance of it, of them walking in Drakestein.
But with Dutch society still carrying the wounds of World War II, Klaus was viewed with suspicion.
From the Royal Palace at Soestdijk at 1 o'clock on Monday afternoon, Queen Juliana told her 12 million subjects something they all knew already, something many of them did not want to hear. That her eldest daughter Beatrix, heiress presumptive to the throne of Holland, was to marry a German.
We had become anti-German, so he had to overcome a major obstacle.
There was a ripple through the country. I know friends of my parents who would never, when going on holiday, never drive through Germany, just out of principle.
As details about Klaus became known, he had to publicly explain his past.
There have been stories that you were a member of Hitler youth groups.
Well, you know, during the war, and even before the war, was, how you say in English, obligatoire.
Yeah,
we were obliged to become a member of Hitler Jugend. And especially, at school, you know. There was no way out.
When it also emerged he'd served in the German army, the Dutch parliament began to dig a little deeper. If Klaus's background was not approved by Parliament, Beatrix may have been forced to choose between her fiancé and the throne.
What did he do during the Second World War? Did he himself commit war crimes? So they asked one of the leading historians of Holland, a Jew himself, to do research. It took him 3 days to do the research, and he wrote a very thin report on Klaus saying he was fine. No, there's no evidence of him committing atrocities.
With Klaus approved by Parliament, the wedding was scheduled for 10th of March 1966. But discontent over the marriage still simmered across the Netherlands.
I suppose they will marry Klaus van Amsberg. With my personal opinion, it is no good.
On the day of the wedding, crowds of protesters gathered along the route to the church.
It went fairly rapidly out of control. Although they had expected some trouble, they hadn't expected as much trouble as the authorities as they got.
There were Nazi slogans daubed on official buildings.
The Dutch have not forgotten. Some of them do not forgive.
There was Klaus raus, which means Klaus out. Let's get rid of Klaus.
The air filled with smoke bombs. This was a moment of national demonstration. It was threatening to the couple at the time. You know, this number of people on the streets against them.
Yet once inside the church, the couple appeared unfazed by the unrest outside.
I attended the wedding. We didn't hear anything. You didn't notice, and you were not told of what happened outside.
Everybody could see she was radiant. She really loved this man.
May true and lasting happiness bless her and the husband of her choice.
Upon joining the Dutch royal family, Prince Klaus, as he was now known, set about winning over the Dutch public.
His personality was a very attractive one. He was somewhat shy, modest man, certainly in no way at all overbearing.
So Klaus learned Dutch, but we really, there's not many people who learn Dutch. So we quickly appreciate when somebody takes the trouble to do so.
Beatrix's husband's standing rose in the eyes of the Dutch public throughout the 1970s. But towards the end of the decade, her father, Prince Bernhard, would drag the young princess into an international controversy. The American aircraft manufacturer Lockheed was discovered to have been bribing global figures in exchange for lucrative contracts.
In 1976, it became apparent that a high Dutch official had received the amount of $1 million. And it soon was clear that this high-ranking Dutch official was Prince Bernhard.
When that came out, I mean, there was a general outcry and, you know, what have you done?
Beatrix's mother, Queen Juliana, threatened to abdicate if the government prosecuted Bernhard. Reports emerged of Beatrix, who would become queen in her mother's place, taking a similar position.
Some people have said that they know for sure that Crown Princess Beatrix said to her mother and the government, "I cannot succeed my mother in case my father is being prosecuted." That's not a way to start. We had a full-blown constitutional crisis.
Prince Bernhard was not prosecuted, but was stripped of his military titles and uniforms. But this brush with scandal impacted Beatrix.
She suddenly realized my father is not only a very charming man, but he did something which is really opposed to everything I stand for.
Certainly the Lockheed scandal would be a defining moment, not just in the personal life of Princess Beatrix, but certainly in how she decided to conduct her public life going forward.
It certainly made her more resolute to do it right. She said so just before she became queen. We must do things seriously.
By the end of the 1970s, trust in the Dutch establishment had hit an all-time low. But a new figurehead with a more serious style than her predecessor would guide the country into a new decade. Queen Beatrix. By winning back support for the royal family, she would steer it away from disaster and revive the relationship between the public and the monarchy. In April 1980, the 42-year-old Princess Beatrix was poised to take the throne. Her mother, Queen Juliana, was abdicating to make way for her. A new monarch would usually be a moment of national celebration. But Beatrix was taking the throne at a time of great strain for the Netherlands.
In 1980, Dutch society is riven with division, particularly the sort of gap between rich and poor. There's real protest against a perceived lack of affordable housing.
With debate raging about social inequality, squatters in Amsterdam prepared to protest on the day of Beatrix's investiture.
She was the head of a state that they wanted to protest against, a state that they held responsible for the lack of lower income housing.
These protesters mixed with really revolutionary kind of persons that resulted in an atmosphere of revolution within the city.
They had a wonderful slogan, geen woning, geen kroning, which would translate to no home, no throne.
Beatrix's investiture took place on April 30th, 1980, in the Royal Palace on Amsterdam's Dam Square.
Normally this is a place of pigeons and people. There's always people here. But on that day, we were like a bit under siege. There was so much security here, and this was all cordoned off. And it was tense.
As crowds of protesters gathered in the streets around Dam Square, inside the royal palace, Beatrix's mother signed the abdication, making her daughter the new queen. Beatrix was then sworn in during a ceremony in the church next door. Cameras were permitted into the church, allowing the Dutch public to witness the event through the medium of television.
I was a senator at the time, so I was there. It was impressive. Also her speech, the emotion behind it.
Bent u een moeder geweest? Hoe u uw taak als koningin heeft opgevat? Vol plichtsbetrachting en diep menselijke belangstelling heb ik van dichtbij mogen meemaken.
The regal calm inside the church was in stark contrast to the tense atmosphere developing in the streets beyond Dam Square.
We could hear something, yeah. We could hear that outside something was going wrong.
Across the city, Dutch police set out to suppress the unrest.
The supporters were coming from here, the police were coming from here, and they also used tear gas, which is, kind of unheard of. Police were using water. It was a battle scene in the street.
The mayor, who was the chief of police, he was inside the church. And he heard that the police were thinking of shooting people. And he said, you can do anything you like, but no, don't shoot. Don't shoot. There are lots of stories of protesters as well as policemen who almost died that day.
It became not a day of celebration, really, but instead a day of protest, not what Beatrix would have wanted or expected. The irony, perhaps, is that, yes, Beatrix was incredibly rich and wealthy, but she also did have a keen social conscience. She was very aware of poverty and injustice. But certainly at the moment of her investiture, she seemed to smack of everything that the protesters were opposed to.
From a challenging start, Beatrix was soon proving herself on the biggest international stage. In 1982, she paid a visit to one of her closest royal neighbours, Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain.
I did a lot in the preparation of that visit. It was a big deal. As royal visits go, it was one of the more important.
Mrs. Thatcher gave the Queen lunch. Rather unusual is because heads of state don't normally have serious political talks at Downing Street. But then Queen Beatrix, though a constitutional monarch, is a serious political person.
It was very much a statement of intent for her. That was her way of announcing to the world that she intended to use her degree and her education and also her position to affect change.
During this visit, she met with the Greater London Council to discuss inner city problems common to both the UK and Netherlands. At another point in the trip, Beatrix did not shy away from one of the most contentious issues in the UK at that time, its place in Europe.
And tonight, at a Guildhall banquet, she made her major speech of the visit. An earnest and thoughtful examination of the reasons why Britain must remain in the common market.
She made that speech with considerable passion. There have not been many foreigners who've seen fit to involve themselves in our public debate about it, and she's absolutely one of them.
It's something we're not used to seeing here in the UK from our monarchs. We don't expect them to have political opinions, but she's one for individualism, she's one for breaking boundaries.
But more than anything, the visit showed the world that Beatrix had the royal sparkle to match any reigning monarch.
And tonight, the state banquet, given by the House of Windsor for the House of Orange, two of the richest royal families in the world, and for once in these parlous times, not afraid to display it.
It was very much a coming together of two royal families, but also showing off Beatrix as being a figure in her own right.
Although a triumph for Queen Beatrix, royal watchers noticed something amiss with her husband, Prince Claus.
Prince Claus, German by birth, has recently been in a Swiss psychiatric clinic, and during this visit he will follow a restricted schedule, not attending the receptions originally arranged for both of them.
And if you look at the footage of a particular dinner there, you see a really gay and happy Queen Beatrix. And Claus is not sitting next to her, but you see him absolutely lonely. He's sort of playing with something that's on the table, and he's looking depressed.
At the time, some people commented that perhaps this was a result of him having to play second fiddle to his wife, who obviously as Queen was given greater respect and attention than he was.
Klaus would battle with depression for the rest of his life. In 2001, in a controversial interview on the globally transmitted Radio Netherlands, Dutch journalist Willem Oltmans would lay the blame for Klaus's breakdown firmly at Beatrix's door.
The guy went berserk, because the moment the Queen became Queen, he would not know whether she talked to him as Queen or as his wife. She is so totally absorbed by this role. The moment she leaves the palace, she's Queen. But inside the palace, she's now Queen too.
Zij is een heel interessante persoonlijkheid, omdat ze zo ontzettend anders is binnen de muren dan buiten de muren. Dus ze kan heel driftig zijn en heel emotioneel.
I know that people like to speculate about these kind of things. She was not nice to him and so on. She was a cold woman. I don't think so.
There is a lot of evidence from people who know them both very well that he was absolutely devoted to her right to the end, and vice versa.
Whatever happened behind closed doors, it was clear to the public that she did indeed have a more formal manner than the previous Queen.
She was seen as a rather more kind of aloof, distant figure. And this was actually something that she worked to overcome.
Beatrix made a major change to the Queen's Day celebrations that brought her, literally, closer to her public.
It used to be the royal family would stand and the people would come by and give presents, and it would be very formal like that. And then she said, let's go into the country, let's go to that city, let's go to that village.
That's what enabled her to display, over time, to large parts of the country, the warmth and friendliness of her basic personality and her energy.
But it took an unrehearsed moment during Queen's Day celebrations of 1988 to finally break down her aloof image. Dutch national television cameras followed Beatrix throughout the day, capturing intimate interactions with the public.
She walks through the streets and she's fast. She doesn't walk slowly. She really is ahead of the troops.
And then suddenly this man comes from the crowd and kisses her on the cheek, and she is surprised, and she actually steps out of her role for a moment and is just, hey, it was a lovely moment. It was a lovely moment.
That was a very important moment in which she showed herself as this spontaneous person.
His kiss was our kiss. We also knew it wasn't easy, and she didn't always have an easy time.
The Dutch public grew closer to Queen Beatrix as her reign progressed. But in 2000, a disaster revealed yet another previously unseen side to the monarch. Captured on film by a local cameraman, shocking footage shows the moment a fireworks factory exploded in the town of Enschede, killing 23, injuring nearly 1,000 and destroying entire streets.
That was a huge disaster. You see the visit of the Queen a few days after.
Queen Beatrix will have seen very quickly that this was an occasion when the mother of the nation needed to identify with the suffering of the nation.
In emotional news footage, the nation saw their queen comforting the bereaved.
And you saw her sorrow on television. That made her popular, and that made her loved.
Over the course of her reign, she grew from being this very sort of distant, slightly austere figure to one who was liked, respected, seen by her people regularly and concerned about them.
By the end of the 20th century, Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands had not only restored the nation's trust in the monarchy, but also transformed her image by giving the Dutch public glimpses of her true personality. But a new century brought new challenges. And Beatrix would soon find herself at the centre of a bitter fight over the future of the country. By the turn of the millennium, Queen Beatrix had grown into a popular monarch who could not only connect with her public, but also represent her nation on the global stage. But Dutch society was changing, and she would soon find herself drawn into a bitter political war that threatened to tear the Netherlands apart.
There was a huge influx of immigration from Morocco, a lot of Muslim immigrants in particular. And as a result of that, there was quite a big debate about the extent to which Islam should be able to permeate Dutch society.
The threat of the right emerged as a feature of Dutch society in response to the perceived threat of Islamic militancy. And this rather sort of open, freedom-loving, peace-loving, liberal Dutch society was really kind of challenged.
The Netherlands is not an immigration country.
In the autumn of 2001, a politician called Pim Fortuyn emerged as the leader of an increasingly popular far-right party.
He came and suddenly started saying very directly in television interviews and discussions, "You guys just don't know what ordinary people are thinking. You don't know how much resentment there is out there in the community.
The annual stream of tens of thousands of newcomers who largely ends up as illegal aliens must stop."
The atmosphere was electric at the time when Pim Fortuyn was active. It was absolutely electric.
The arguments of Pim Fortuyn were firmly opposed to the values that Queen Beatrix was seen to stand for.
After 9/11, she becomes ever more associated with this tolerant, inclusive way of embracing, really, immigration.
One can read from her Christmas speeches that she was highly concerned about populism.
Maar de moderne mens lijkt weinig aandacht te hebben voor de naaste. Nu is men vooral met zichzelf bezig. We zijn geneigd van de ander weg te kijken.
As a compassionate queen who'd spoken out publicly on political issues, Beatrix's inclusive attitude rubbed up against anti-immigration sentiments. Pim Fortuyn took exception to Beatrix, at one point publicly advising her to retire.
Which is, very surprising because, of course, Beatrix wasn't a politician, she was queen. But here she was being targeted and threatened.
While she may not directly have been addressing certain politicians, she was making her feelings known at a time where it was very dangerous to do so.
In this febrile atmosphere, violence erupted. Pim Fortuyn was assassinated in May 2002 by a left-wing activist. 2 years later, the filmmaker Theo van Gogh was killed by a young Muslim of Moroccan descent in an attack believed to be in retaliation for a controversial film that criticised the Quran.
Here we have, within the space of 2 years, 2 assassinations that are speaking against the very issues that Beatrix, the Queen, is continuing to champion.
My country is going the wrong way. She definitely must have had that feeling. Now people are getting killed, shot, stabbed because of their beliefs, because of what they stand for.
Pim Fortuyn's successor, Geert Wilders, continued to attack Beatrix as an emblem of tolerance.
When she's in Oman and she wears a scarf to visit a mosque, which of course is the accepted practice, she's turned upon really by Wilders.
And said words to the effect of, that was posturing, to which she produced an extremely tart rejoinder, but it wasn't anything of the kind.
Beatrix was a queen who could, in theory, influence politics. The Queen had the responsibility of choosing someone to chair discussions needed in the run-up to the formation of a new government.
But the person you choose is obviously just one person with individual attitudes and enthusiasms. So she certainly did exercise a measure of political power, and it has sometimes been alleged that her enthusiasms led her to support one group rather than another.
She always took her decisions on the basis of the advice that she got. There are people who attribute particular decisions to the head of state, but the head of state has no views.
In the 2010 election, when Geert Wilders won 24 of the 150 seats, his Freedom Party became the third biggest in Parliament. Yet negotiations to form a coalition resulted in his party being excluded from government. There was speculation that Beatrix's well-known opposition to Wilders could have played a part.
It was not her personal decision, it was the election results and the consultancies that moved in that direction.
The truth is nobody knows, because those processes are very wreathed. Usually a party of that size would be taken seriously as a possible constituent of the next coalition. But I've no doubt at all that behind the scenes, she certainly wasn't arguing for the inclusion of Wilders.
In the first decade of the new millennium, just as Beatrix was drawn into political controversies, her personal life took the first of several tragic turns. After battling long-standing health problems, Prince Klaus passed away in 2002 at the age of 76. Moving images of Klaus's funeral were broadcast across the Netherlands.
To see her as a widow was not what we wanted for her.
Royalty from across Europe travelled to the Netherlands for Klaus's funeral in the city of Delft.
Prince Charles came that day. I accompanied him to the funeral and briefed him beforehand. He has always been on very close terms with Queen Beatrix and was undoubtedly very happy to be there to help her in this difficult hour.
The loss of Klaus left Beatrix facing the final decade of her reign without her closest support. And the years ahead would be the toughest yet, as tragedy after tragedy took a personal toll and generated an outpouring of sympathy across the country. Although a serious and sometimes formal monarch, in moments of national catastrophe, Queen Beatrix made significant gestures of compassion that brought her closer to her public. During the Queen's Day celebrations of 2009, as the royal family visited the town of Apeldoorn, both nation and Queen would be bonded in grief. Royal photographer Robin Utrecht was covering the day for national media.
It started all like a really happy day. Crowd was cheering at them, dressed in orange. People were cheering. Queen Beatrix on the bus waving to people.
Every year, the Queen's Day procession was a much-loved television event. These images were broadcast live across the nation.
And then I was sitting in a press bus behind the royal bus. And then we came at the crossroad. And then the royal bus just went around the corner. And then I heard like 2 explosions. The car came from there. And he hit those people that were standing behind the fences. The car ended at the needle that's over there. I took pictures of people flying in the air. It was so fast what happened, you know, and then the bus stopped and everybody was in panic.
And you see the members of the royal family in horror because they see the people who have been just thrown away by the car.
And then ambulances came and yeah, it was like a war zone. For such a happy day, it ended so tragically.
7 members of the public were killed. The perpetrator of the attack, a 38-year-old man from a small town in the east of the Netherlands, also died shortly after being taken to hospital. Although his motives were not fully discovered, he'd lost his job earlier that year and had faced financial troubles.
Clearly, her monarchy was a symbol to that man of what he didn't have, and it was a clear source of frustration, enough that he wanted to either kill the royal family or was so frustrated that he wanted to injure innocent people.
The evening after the attack, Queen Beatrix addressed the public directly on national television.
Out of an awful and tragic situation, she was able to unite people. And in turn, that resulted in the people perhaps trusting her more and her being respected even more as a leader.
3 years after the devastating attack on Queen's Day, Beatrix's second son, Prince Friso, was involved in an accident during the royal family's annual skiing holiday.
He went off-piste with a group of friends and an avalanche hit, and he was buried under the snow for 15 to 20 minutes.
After suffering major brain damage and a heart attack, Friso was rushed to hospital in Austria, where he fell into a coma, later being transferred to the Wellington Hospital in London.
Every weekend, Queen Beatrix would fly to London and read for her son in coma from a book. That's what I heard.
It's just heartbreaking.
Prince Friso remained in a coma for 18 months before passing away in August 2013.
Because she wanted him closer to her, he is not interred in the royal grave, but he is buried in a very small, very lovely churchyard near her home where she lives as Princess Beatrix in Drakestein.
The death of Friso revealed to the public yet another side to their queen.
A queen becomes a person who loves deeply when you see her in grief.
Wat vaker gebeurt, als de koninklijke familie een tragedie meemaakt, dan kan iedereen daarmee meeleven. En je ziet vaak dat dat juist de populariteit van de koninklijke familie verhoogt. Dat is een heel gek psychologisch mechanisme.
In the same year that Prince Friso died, Queen Beatrix also stepped down from the Dutch throne. On April 30th, she signed the abdication in Amsterdam's Royal Palace.
And on that moment, there was a loud cheer on the Dam Square. A cheer of, okay, you do that. We just want to let you know that we're here with you in this moment.
You see the difference in atmosphere so clearly between 1980, when she became queen, and 2013, when she abdicated. So maybe she thought, I've done a good job. And the last thing you see is that she pushes her grandchildren on the balcony. That's her last act, pushing her grandchildren on the balcony. Now it's your task.
In her 3 decades on the throne, Queen Beatrix restored Holland's trust in the monarchy. A queen once seen as aloof had transformed herself into a warm and relatable figurehead. But what makes Beatrix special amongst European royalty? And how will she be remembered?
There's a Dutch word, doorzettingsvermogen, which is the ability to push something through. She set her jaw and she pushed on through, despite all these different controversies.
She'll be seen as this sort of bit of a one-off, really, who was glamorous with that amazing haircut, but also was intelligent and charismatic, confident about speaking out on issues. The very best of the Dutch, really.